Well, good morning, everybody, wherever you are. You are watching the Ted Manila Information Show, TMI for short. I'm, of course, the Manila Chan, and that over there is the Ted Rall. Thanks for tuning in. We, of course, cover anything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, fad diets, the occult, anything and everything goes here because we believe you can never have too much information. So, a word of warning if you are looking for a straight laced, button down news program where people don't drop F bombs and say bad words, this is not it.
No, this
But
is not it.
if that is what you're looking for, you're at the right place, but you might want to turn the volume down if you are at work. So this is all the stuff you already know that you want to hear more about, and then some other stuff you probably didn't know that you needed to know. And then, of course, we're going to laugh along the way because, what else can you do, Ted? You're going to go insane if you just don't laugh at all the stupidity happening all around the world, right?
Gotta
laugh. Gotta laugh.
That's my entire profit model, right? A cartoon about it.
That's true. That's true. I don't get to do that on the other hand with, doing news, because TV News Manila is straight-laced, is buttoned down,
True.
is big-haired, is made up. And I don't really laugh. I can't. I'm not supposed to. So here I get to be more of myself and work on my F-bomb dropping because I have a kindergartner and he repeats stuff. So
yeah, he
does.
does. But as I learned when my son was that age, even if you never curse, I mean, they're going to get it from society. There's no way to protect them. So
I know.
You might as well be that person.
Yes and no, but then you get the teachers at school or the other parents that look at you funny or sideways because they're like, oh, what kind of mom is she that her kid knows the F word?
That's like all of them. I mean, you show me a kid who doesn't curse by the time they're 9 years old, and I will show you a derp. I mean.
Well, no, that's not a nice word. That's not.
No, it's not.
Ted. No, it's not. We never said we're nice.
No.
All right. Of course, Ted and I are here live Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern. So make sure you guys like and follow this show. And if you are in the financial position to do so, and you're watching in the Rumble, not the app, on the Rumble desktop version, you would be able to support the show by hitting the subscribe button, become a $5 per month monthly subscriber to help us keep going and doing this thing. If you're on YouTube and any platform for that matter, please share us, thumbs up, or as Jamaro would say, smash that like button. Because it really does help with the show growing, so we can grow in numbers. So the Ted,
which Manila we need to do.
We need to do that.
Oh, there's an announcement before you bring us in.
Yes.
We're trying something new here. Ted Manila Advice Information, where we will give you advice about anything and everything: romance, ethics, work, money. And we will do our best to answer your question. So what you need to do is record an audio clip, no more than say 1 or 2 minutes. And then you email that audio clip to an email address that I'm about to give you. And we will play it on the air. And Manila and I will do our best. In all seriousness, we might joke a little bit, but we will do our best really, truly to to give you some important, some good advice for you that you might be able to use. So we're going to do that first one on Friday. But don't wait if you have a question. Now, obviously, if you can just be a jerk and send I hate you and fuck you.
No dick pics.
But we're just not gonna. But we'll just ignore it and delete it. So do what you want. But if you do it proper, we're gonna play it on the air and you'll.
Ted, I feel like by opening this door, we're going to be inviting D pics.
Oh, well,
or T pics.
Only address it. Well, so I'm the only person here who's going to be looking at them because I have the email. So Manila's not going to be seeing your D pics or any pics whatsoever.
But Ted, they might want you to see them.
They might, and I don't care. I've seen everything and anything. So Like,
Okay.
I don't want your stuff,
All
but
right.
like, if I mean, I'll just get deleted. I don't care, really. I mean, it's like water off a duck's back. I don't care.
Okay.
So, all right. So here we go. So here's the email address. It's a Yahoo address, right? So it's TMI question at yahoo.com. All right. TMI question, singular question, at yahoo.com. All right. Go ahead.
And
Bring
so
us in.
would they send an actual video if they'd like, or just the audio?
Oh, I guess you could send a video if you really want to, but yeah, you could send a video. But I mean, I think that's good. I don't know how we play that here. Oh, yeah, you could play that. All right, you can send an audio or a video. But videos are big and kind of hard to email. So if you're sending a big, even a 2-minute video, send a link, right? Send a link to it.
Or it would have to be a very short video.
If it's like, yes, 60 seconds, 90 seconds, you can.
I think it's less than a minute.
You can email that from your phone.
Yeah. You can email like a minute. Generally is safe, like a minute or less.
Yeah.
That's generally acceptable by email. Most
you can identify yourself or not identify yourself, but you can just say it's Bob from Tallahassee or whatever.
Right. Bob from Tallahassee. My question is
your social security number. We're not. It's not like that. So it's just.
But Ted, we could sell that on the. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, I know. For
there's places
pennies on the penny. All right, go ahead and bring us in.
All right. Let's get into the show and do some headlines.
Okay, our big story for the weekend. President Biden has authorized the first use of U.S.-supplied long-range missiles by Ukraine for strikes inside Russia. That's right, the guy who dropped out of the election and lost the election and is now a lame duck and who probably should be 25th Amendmented out of office has just decided to escalate the war in Ukraine. Those weapons are likely to be initially employed against Russian and North Korean troops in defense of Ukrainian forces. Those are in the Kursk region of Western Russia. Keyword Russia. These North Korean troops are not in Ukraine, they're in Russia. Allowing the Ukrainians to use the long-range missiles known as ATACMS, Army Tactical Missile Systems, came in response to Russia's surprise decision to bring North Korean troops into the fight, officials say. Bullshit. I mean, the North Korean troops did not go into Ukraine. They did not escalate anything.
It's not an escalation.
The Ukrainians escalated things by going into Russia. I don't blame them for doing it. It's war. But, the North Koreans came to kick them out of Russia.
But there are consequences.
But it's also they're an ally. I mean, that's not it's really not crossing any kind of line that, in as far as war, in the rules of war. Anyway, Biden began to ease restrictions on the use of U.S. supplied weapons on Russian soil after Russia launched a cross-border assault in May in the direction of Kharkiv. That's the second largest city in Ukraine. To help the Ukrainians defend that city, Biden allowed them to use HIMARS, which are high-mobility artillery rocket systems, which have a 50-mile range against Russian forces directly across the border. Biden didn't want to allow the Ukrainians to use longer-range ATACMS. Their range is about 190 miles in defense of Kharkiv. While the officials say they don't expect the shift to fundamentally alter the course of the war, so why do it? One of the goals of the policy change, they said, is to send a message to the North Koreans that their forces are now vulnerable and they shouldn't send more. Some U.S. officials said they feared that Ukraine's use of missiles across the border could prompt President Vladimir Putin of Russia to retaliate with force against the U.S. and its coalition partners. I would say he would not do that against the U.S. Coalition partners, though, maybe. But other U.S. officials thought those fears were overblown. Yeah, because, Putin, he's a big bluffer. Everybody always sees that about him. He's the kind of guy, he doesn't mean what he says.
He blows smoke.
Talk shit. And then he's like, I was just kidding. Have more vodkas all around. He's not a serious man at all. As anyone can plainly tell. According to Eurasia analyst Alex Bridot, Russian President Putin may respond in kind, however. Putin indicated over the summer that he would arm U.S. adversaries in response to Western weapons being used on Russian territory. There have been subsequent reports this fall that Russia has offered some support to the Houthis attacking shipping in the Red Sea. Those are, of course, one of the rebel groups, major faction in Yemen. But if the missiles are used to fire deep inside Russia, the Kremlin warned earlier today, local time, that it would see this as an attack from the United States, not Ukraine, and said Biden's policy reversal was adding oil to the fire.
Yeah, like a no duh, Ted. A big fat no duh. Just come on, dude. Like you got like days left in office. Like at this point, like you said, 25th Amendment him or at this point, just step down and let Kamala Harris get her little victory by being the first lady, multicolor, whatever president, whatever. Just don't do this. Don't do. I mean, I think they're deliberately doing this to muck up the waters even more because Trump has already said going into this, like months and months ago, that he was going to end the war, 24 hours or whatever. But with Volodymyr Zelensky this weekend, Ted, going on Ukrainian state media and saying that he believes the war is about to end. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but Zelensky admitted that he believes the war is coming to an end. No exact date, but he believes with President Trump coming back to power that this spells the end for the war. So why would the U.S. give this green light in the 11th hour as we are all looking towards the sunset of this war, but to fuck things up even further for the incoming Trump administration? That there's like no benefit to this other than that for the Democratic Party is what I think.
Well, look, one useful way of considering whether something is right or wrong, I think, is to consider what if things were reversed, right? What if, let's say, let's say this was 2020, the outgoing president was Trump, and then incoming president is Biden or Harris, let's say. And the policy is about to change pretty radically in a major foreign policy issue for the United States. U.S. support for Ukraine is arguably the number one, or tied with Israel and Gaza, number one or number two foreign policy crisis in the world that the U.S. is currently dealing with. When the policy is about to change, it's gross to undermine the will of the people. The will of the people, the voters have decided to elect Trump. You may not like that, but he's going to be the president. And it's sort of like, he gets to have his appointees, whether you like him or not. He also gets to have his foreign policy, whether you like it or not. And it's really, I think, rogue for the outgoing Democratic administration, which has been a lame duck administration now for the better part of 5 months, to go ahead and try to undermine Trump. I mean, it's trying to box Trump in to a situation where he's not going to be able to end the war because it will have escalated beyond that point. I don't think it's likely to work, but I think it's a really gross thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's a terrible, I don't know if this is like, I can't think of anything historically, at least not in the 20th century, if this is precedent setting. I mean, we're now in the 21st century, I know, but I'm thinking in the 20th century, have we seen any case of active hot war where, one party, the incumbent party, lost, and then they escalated the country's position in that hot war? I don't think there is.
No.
I don't think there is precedent. So I think this is precedent setting. Like,
I think you're right. I mean, we'd have to. This is a Scott Stantis question. He would know the answer to that question, and I will ask him. But I don't.
Yeah, this is.
I don't know.
Terrible, and I think everybody needs to just bombard the White House with some phone calls and tell them what a shit ass idea this is, and say, pull back, flip that decision, because we are. God forbid we're at the precipice of peace, Ted. God forbid that.
I don't know if you've ever seen the 1967 Dudley Moore movie Bedazzled, the original one, not the one with Brendan Fraser. It's really worth seeing. I'm pretty sure you can stream it on Netflix for free. But anyway, Peter Cook plays the devil, and at one point, Peter Cook is defending himself because he's being told, your life is so easy. All you do is do evil. And he's like, my life isn't so easy. Do you know all it takes is two lunatics to sit down and sign a peace agreement that could fuck up most of my business for centuries to come. That's
here we are.
every time something like this happens, I think of that little exchange. All right, let's keep going. India successfully tested its first long-range hypersonic missile over the weekend, that according to government officials, maneuvering mid-flight and impacting with precision. Hypersonic missiles, of course, became famous because Russia developed them early on. They go more than 5 times the speed of sound. That's more than 3,000 miles per hour. And that means they also have, that would mean they can issue, each one can issue up to 5 sonic booms and have a range of over 930 miles. Hypersonic missiles are able to fly lower than ballistic missiles. It makes them harder to detect and intercept. They're also very precise, don't need to follow a predetermined trajectory, so they can be. Saturday's test took place on Abdul Kalam Island off the coast of India's eastern state of Odisha. I think that's I'm pronouncing that right. If I'm not, I apologize to all our Indian listeners. India now joins Odisha. I think it's Odisha. India now joins 3 countries, the US, Russia, and China, in demonstrating hypersonic capability. North Korea and the Houthis in Yemen claim to have hypersonic weapons as well. Other countries, including Germany, France, Japan, and South Korea, are trying to get them as well.
Isn't that crazy? Like when you juxtapose what countries are confirmed to have them versus who
France
is
doesn't have
still
them.
working
France
on it?
doesn't have them. The Houthis do. North Korea does.
Right.
South Korea doesn't. Yeah.
Like what's happening there? And obviously this came from the technology that was broken by the Russians. Like they figured this out first, and then the US was like, but no, look here. Space nukes. They're going to do space nukes.
Mm-hmm. I remember that. Yeah.
Because the DOD, it not to be outdone, the US DOD, it's like that's egg on their face, I think. So they're like, but no, they're not. Those aren't really.
It's weird because the Americans knew the Russians were working on that. Just like the Russians also have this major advantage in anti-drone technology. And again, everyone knew they were working on it, and they've demonstrated that advantage in the on the front lines in Ukraine. But it's almost like, well, they're going to do that. Let them do them. But it doesn't seem like a very smart way to up the stakes.
Look at the video we're looking at right now. So this has to bring into question the bromance, the budding bromance between Putin and Modi, because we saw like Modi going to India, and they were like doing yoga together and riding horseback together, doing whatever. Like he was invited not to the presidential palace. This was like Putin's personal ranch property. That's a bromance, Ted. Like it wasn't like the presidential palace in Moscow. They went to Putin's house and were like having a slumber party. That shows you a new level of trust and relationship, especially among what these guys are part of the BRICS members, right? And here we have Trump coming in, Biden mucking up the relationship on his way out in the 11th hour. What does this do, you think, to India and the US if you've got this bromance and now they have this hypersonic, this joint development of a hypersonic missile?
Well, India's in an interesting position because, normally in great power intrigue, countries tend to have to choose sides, right? India hasn't chosen a side. They're acting more like a buffer state, like, a country like, say, Afghanistan traditionally always tried to make nice with all of its neighbors. India is a massive nation, right? It has, it's the most populous nation in the world now, and they have their economy is booming. I mean, it's weird that they still have good relations with the U.S. and those relations are only going to improve once Trump takes office in January, because Modi and Trump are aligned politically in many ways, and they got along well before during Trump's first term. So I think Modi's very pleased about that. But Modi's kind of like, I can be friends with Russia and the United States. Why not? That's the behavior usually of a weak country, but India's not a weak country. So they're a regional superpower. They are obviously the biggest power on the Indian Ocean. So, it's really super interesting. By the way, let's give a shout out. We got a donation on Friday via Rumble from a user named Vintage. Thank you, Vintage,
Vintage Lefty.
for that
Vintage
support.
Lefty.
Vintage Lefty.
Thank you
so much, Vintage Lefty. And just a reminder, we need money, so send money. All right, let's get into more headlines. The EU's top diplomat has confirmed that he would suggest to members of his bloc that the EU pause its political dialogue with Israel. In other words, we're not turning you off, but we're putting you on mute, maybe, citing the country's conduct of the war in Gaza. Many people tried to stop the war in Gaza. This has not happened yet. And I don't see a hope for this to happen. Just stating the obvious. That's why we have to put pressure on the Israeli government and obviously also on the Hamas side. Joseph Borrell told journalists ahead of an EU meeting. I think the Hamas side's already getting the pressure from the Israelis. They don't need any more pressure from the EU. Like any firmly worded letters are probably going to fall on deaf ears. The EU's foreign policy chief last week proposed that the bloc suspend its political dialogue with Israel, citing possible human rights violations. Let's take out the possible. Let's take out the word possible. In the war in Gaza, according to 4 diplomats and a letter seen by Reuters. In a sign, his approach would not be welcomed by all EU members. Dutch Foreign Minister Casper Veldkamp said the EU needs to uphold its dialogue with Israel. In the view of the Netherlands, this door should be kept open. I might surprise you here, Manila, because as you know, I'm a fervent supporter of Palestine, and I think what Israel has done since October 7th, and of course, obviously before, has been absolutely disgusting.
Right.
That said, I'm generally opposed to cutting off dialogue. I think dialogue.
I'm with you, actually.
Like lines should be kept open. That's not the answer. Not talking is how you get wars. So
yes,
I would be against this particular
I'm
proposal.
actually with you on that. I think that's very consistent between the two of us, actually, is that we believe in open dialogue, and that should be true through and through and through for everybody, right? Whether it's between the US and North Korea or Russia and Ukraine, or like, how you create a permanent problem is by siloing these countries like the US had done with North Korea, where we're technically still at war with them, Ted, 50 some odd 60 years later.
Yeah.
We're technically still at war. It's just a frozen conflict. But technically, it's because we stopped talking to them like 50 years ago. So nothing gets solved if you don't talk. That's the problem.
Yeah, there's no possibility
I'm with
for
you.
it. And the thing is, what's really funny is even when they claim they're not talking, they kind of have to talk. Like the U.S. and Iran obviously have atrocious diplomatic relations, right?
Well, back channels. They have
but
back
there's
channels.
a back. Yeah, there have to be, right? There's back channels. So, for example, unknown to most Americans is in the Pakistani embassy in Washington, there is a back office that is the Iran interest section of the Pakistani embassy. And let's say you needed an Iranian visa, you can go there and apply for one, even though we have no consular representation. We don't recognize the Islamic Republic of Iran. The point is, people have to talk. So since you're talking anyway, just admit you're talking and just talk.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
Right. All right. Next story's kind of gross, Ted. Like,
I know. Well, I'm really curious where you come down on this. I have no idea. New guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics suggests that forced sterilization, here's something from the 1930s, should be considered a treatment option for children, adolescents, and young adults who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. This is a troubling approach to reproductive health for this population, says mental health clinician Consuelo Senior in a Stat First opinion. Forced sterilization fundamentally violates a person's bodily autonomy, but people with IDD have been subject to this procedure for more than a century. I don't see the but there, and to be more appropriate. Many people view it as a way to keep this population safe, since 90% of people with IDD will experience sexual abuse at some point in their lives. Gross.
Horrible?
So obviously there's an extremely long and troubling history that mainly centers around eugenics and the idea of what, like, the Nazis called in the early 1930s, life not worthy of life. People who were considered to, and it's not an accident. And I think it's important to note that the Holocaust really began with people who were intellectually disabled. They were the dry run for the very first people who were gassed. dragged out of mental asylums in Germany, and then they were killed, and like a lame excuse letter was sent to, like, yeah, your sister fell down the stairs. So sorry, come pick up her body. And they used to use gas vans. And the point is that, like, they wanted to see how that would go, and then they kept, then they moved to physically handicapped people. Forced sterilization, of course, is not the same thing as executing people, but I mean, it's pretty gross, because it's also like, once you start to choose that one population for doing it,
Right.
it's like, okay, well, what's next, right? And by the way, this could also really encourage sexual abuse of these patients, because if you think about it, like, if they're in an institution and they're raped, well, they're not going to get pregnant, right?
Right.
So it's like, the signs might not be obvious. So in some
Correct.
ways, it might make it easier for predators to prey on these people. I would say it's like, look, I understand the concern. Obviously, the concern is obvious. I don't have to explain the concern, but it's kind of like you have to weigh these two icky things. And I have to say, fundamentally, you have to err on personal freedom. And there are people who've had, who are mentally ill and who've had children, many of them. And the children were normal, and they had a loving relationship with their kids, and things worked out in a sweet way. I just don't think that you can force. The key word is forced.
Right.
Forced
that's where I fall on this.
You don't force bodily changes on people.
No, I that's where I fall on this hard no, because it, just like I was with the COVID vaccine, if you want it, go get it. Like that. I mean, I don't care. That's you, whatever, you have your option, your choice. But this thing is forced sterilization. This becomes an argument of bodily autonomy especially for somebody that doesn't or may not have the capacity to make that decision for themselves. So, this is a question between the would-be patient and their families that perhaps make the decision for them. But I think you're right, Ted. Like, first of all, it was a horrible statistic to learn that 90% of people with disabilities are somehow sexually abused. Like, oh my God, that's like mind-blowing. This is like a subject that is actually near and dear to my heart, because basically from elementary in California, we had this program called the PALS program. And I don't know if it's still in place, but in the 80s and 90s, that's what we had, which was called Peer Assistance Leadership Program, where, the so-called normies, the non mentally disabled kids that, are chosen to go pair up with the kids that are in the special ed classes to help them socialize and all of this stuff. So I literally grew up from, I would say, third or fourth grade when this program began, all the way through high school with lifelong friends that were mentally challenged one way or another, right? Or physically disabled in one way or another. So this hits really close to home for me. And I couldn't imagine the state that this is something the government would actually even consider. We did this with the Native Americans. We've done this with other populations, Black Americans in the past, in the black and white film footage days. This has happened, and it's never, ever worked out well when you fast forward 50 years from that event. So this is just picking another population that is unable to fight back and unable to say no. The bottom line, this is a hard no for me. This is disgusting that the American Pediatric Association would even consider forcing people to lose the God-given human right of reproduction. Like, there are kids that I knew from the special ed class that grew up and met other special ed kids, and they got married. And
hey, listen, to me, this is like, it's a no-brainer. Like, you just can't do it. It's wrong.
You can't do it.
And besides which, honestly,
period.
I know lots of people. There's lots of individuals, and there's lots of sector. I mean, you could easily say, well, we should have forced sterilization of homeless people, because obviously, how can they have a kid? Why not? Let's have forced sterilization of people who have, who have, say, the BRCA gene, because they might get breast cancer and die young. We can go on and on. I mean, everybody who 23andMe says finds has like a disease that might kill them. Well, you don't want to have to. How about like, let's just go on and on. Forced sterilization of everyone over 40, because you don't want people to have kids too late. To me, like anybody who thinks Israel is awesome, forced sterilization.
Right.
Like,
hard no.
Yeah, no, you just can't do that. This is one of those things where there's no one who could decide, and God's not weighing in. We're not hearing from him. So therefore, that's a no. All right. We have one more story to get to, and we've got our guest coming in. All right. A banana duct taped to a wall may sell for more than $1 million at an upcoming auction at Sotheby's here in New York. The yellow banana fixed to the white wall, you may recall this story, with silver duct tape, is a work called Comedian by the Italian artist Maurizio Catalan. First debuted in 2019 as an edition of 3 fruits at the Art Basel Miami Beach Fair, where it became a much discussed sensation. Another artist took the banana off the wall and ate it. A backup banana was brought in. Selfie-seeking crowds became so thick, Comedian had to be withdrawn from view, but 3 editions of it sold for between $120,000 and $150,000, according to a gallery. Now, the conceptual artwork has an estimated value of between $1 and $1.5 million on an upcoming Sotheby's auction on November 20th. I'm planning to just go to the deli and the hardware store and get the whole thing for about $5.
$5 for a banana?
Well, it's New York. Sotheby's head and the roll of duct tape. Sotheby's head of contemporary art, David Galperin, calls it profound and provocative. What Catalan is really doing is turning a mirror to the contemporary art world and asking questions, provoking thought about how we ascribe value to artworks, what we define as an artwork, Galperin said. Bidders won't be buying the same fruit that was on display in Miami. Obviously, those bananas are gone. Sotheby's said the fruit was always meant to be replaced regularly along with the tape. Duh. What you buy when you buy Catalan's Comedian is not the banana itself, but a certificate of authenticity. The
concept, right? You're buying the concept?
That grants the owner the permission and authority to reproduce this banana and duct tape on their wall as an original artwork by Maurizio Catalan, Galperin said. The very title of the piece suggests Catalan himself likely did not intend for it to be taken seriously. You think? But Chloe Cooper-Jones, assistant professor at Columbia University School of the Arts, right near here, said it was worth thinking about the context. Catalan is often thought of as a trickster artist, she said, but his work is often at the intersection of the humor and the deeply macabre. He's quite often looking at ways of provoking us, not just for the sake of provocation, but to ask us to look into some of the sort of darkest parts of history and of ourselves. And there is a dark side to the banana, a fruit with a history entangled with imperialism, labor exploitation, and corporate power. It would be hard to come up with a better symbol of global trade and all of its exploitations than the banana, Cooper-Jones said. If Comedian is about making people think about their moral complicity in the production of objects they take for granted, you just ate like $500,000. I
guess.
Then it's at least a more useful tool, or at least it's an additional sort of place to go in terms of the questions that this work could be asking, she said. Manila, the reason I wanted to talk about this story is sometimes a banana on a wall is just a banana on a wall. Is it possible that, like, what was that? Do you remember, like, a few years ago, everyone was going crazy about, like, you could invest in, like, a photo, a limited edition photo of something. Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh my God.
Not crypto. What's it called?
Blockchain
art of
it's
some
sort
sort.
of, yeah, like that. But it had a name. I forget what it's called. Someone will put it in the chat, I'm sure. But anyway, this reminds me of that. I mean, it's sort of like Duchamp and his famous Dada toilet, right? It's just a toilet, and then in the 1920s, Duchamp, the Marcel Duchamp, the French Dada artist, signs it to make a statement about art, and so it's kind of like, all right, so he's basically saying art is shit, and like. So I don't doubt that some of this is true, right? But I mean, doesn't it kind of it reminds me of when I first learned about symbolism in middle school, and we read Hawthorne, Scarlet Letter, and they talked about like what is the symbolism of the rose bush that grows on Hester Prynne's grave, and it's like, what did Hawthorne think? I'm thinking, well, Hawthorne died 150 years ago, so we don't fucking know. But like, I'm guessing. So, and I'm thinking, and so I made up bullshit about like the thorn is both beautiful but tough and has a strong defense and got an A. But I remember thinking,
Yeah.
maybe it was just decorative. Maybe he's just evoking a tone. Maybe he's just like, maybe he saw maybe it doesn't mean anything, right? So I'm just, so I think this is super interesting. Like, I mean, all of this is true about the dark side to the banana, but it's also kind of like, it's kind of silly, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. I'm not an art expert. Like, maybe you give me a Rothko, give me a Da Vinci. Okay, I get that. But there's the toilet. The banana thing, that's way over my head. It's just, like I'll stare at a Jackson Pollock. I'm not going to stare at a banana taped to a wall.
Donald Trump wants that toilet.
Oh my God. I just don't get it. It's not, way too highbrow for me, I guess. I just want to eat a banana and call it a day. I get some other installation work like this, like we're looking at on the screen. I get it. But this, I don't get. It's beyond me. I really don't have that much to say about it other than going, the art world, everything can be artistic and interpretive. And just like, that famous pipe painting, Le Pipe, something.
Right. Yeah. Magritte. It's
Magritte.
Ceci est une pipe. Ceci n'est pas une pipe.
This is a pipe. Like,
this is
this is a picture. This is not a pipe. This is a picture of a pipe.
It's conceptual art. That one I kind of understood, but that's because I took art history.
All of this.
But I do think, I mean, what's frustrating.
I don't want to go too long on it though, because Susan,
we have to
our guest, is waiting.
Yeah.
But this is beyond me. And anybody, if you have $1 million to spend on a stupid banana, like,
well, what I find ironic is, like, I'm assuming this was a slap in the face at the commercialism and the stupidity of the art world, and it itself gets co-opted and becomes emblematic of that very same stupidity.
Yes.
And meanwhile, there are really, I mean, I used to work in a studio in Queens where to draw cartoons, and all my neighbors in the studio were painters and sculptors. And they would be doing like a giant picture of, whatever, like a giant margarine or something. And I'd be like, what does it mean? I don't know. I'm just making a giant margarine. And then later they just have to come up with like 400 words on a plaque that's going to go by it. Like, this represents the ennui of capitalism in the post-structuralist era. And it's like, just make it up. They just basically, that's what art is now.
Yes.
Is that like, you make the art, you don't have something to say and choose the best way to say it. You just fart something out and then retrofit what it was supposed, and you make up some bullshit about what it meant. Anyway, I'm done.
All right.
I'm not really done. But whatever.
Let's bring in our guest. You want to start the intro?
I will. Okay, so let's figure out what's true and what's not true about the second Trump administration's plans for border policy and the millions of asylum applicants and illegal immigrants who migrated into the United States over the past few years. Trump has appointed former acting director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE, Tom Homan, to be his border czar. Homan has promised so-called quote-unquote shock and awe on day one, but the message is confusing and undefined. Contrary to what Trump said on the campaign trail, the U.S. military probably won't be involved anytime soon in deportations. That job will fall to ICE, which will focus on people here illegally who are suspected of having committed some serious crimes, as well as gang members, which is the same priority currently under effect under President Biden's administration. They don't plan to break down doors at anyone's homes yet. Homan does, however, suggest that raids on workplaces, a tactic that Biden discontinued after Trump, could come back. There's also a mixed messaging on whether families might be separated because some members have legal status and others don't. Meanwhile, immigration advocates and activists will be availing themselves of remedies in the legal system to slow down those expulsions. What tools do they have? How effective can they be? What will really happen in terms of mass deportations under a second Trump administration? To help us break down the facts, we have Susan Pai. Susan Pai has a degree in psychology from UCLA, where she worked at the internationally recognized UCLA Brain Mapping Lab. She attended law school at the University of Louisville and at Nagoya University in Japan. And she's assisted the Senate Judiciary Committee on fraud and abuse issues in business, immigration, civil matters. She's also submitted testimony to the House Judiciary Committee on humanitarian immigrations issues. Now she's a partner at Cap City Law in Washington State. Susan, thank you so much for joining us here on the TMI Show.
Thank you for joining us. Clearly, you're such a slacker. You're up bright and early for us on the other side of the country, now on the West Coast. Congratulations, making partner.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's a really wonderful position that I have here. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you and see you back on with us. So, yeah, let's talk about this. Ted, I think you posed a question at the end there. What's the truth about the mass deportation with another Trump administration? What are you hearing in your field of work right now? I mean, I'm sure attorneys all over the country have got to be talking about this, right, Susan?
Yes, I think those of us who practiced during the first Trump administration, know what's to come. We have a realistic idea of what to expect. And secondly, I have personally worked with Stephen Miller when he worked for Jeff Sessions. So he is the architect behind all of the Trump administration's plans for deportation and how to handle immigration, regardless of the fact that Tom Homan is named as the acting. So I think I have a fairly good handle on what's going to happen. In fact, when President Biden passed his executive order for undocumented aliens to become legalized by marriage to a U.S. citizen or being a child or stepchild of a U.S. citizen parent, I warned everybody at the time that executive order came out not to apply, because those applications would later be used by the Trump administration to facilitate their deportation. And most certainly that will happen.
Wow. It was a trap.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And the Biden administration is also remiss for having done that, knowing that that would be the result.
This is kind of like what happened I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but in the 1930s with no...
by the federal government.
Do you think, first of all, I don't know if anyone has these numbers. What percent?
America, but I can say that there are the estimate is that there are between 15 to 22 million undocumented aliens in the United States at this time. And we know that the immigration court has a backlog of over 3 million cases. We have 1,000 judges. Take an extreme viewpoint. He could decide that all of those people who have been waiting for their asylum cases for 8, 9, 10 years, he could, in theory, round them all up and put them in detention centers.
Well, logistically, what would that look like? I mean, it doesn't. I mean, you just said yourself, the system's completely backed up, right? Mm-hmm. So taking the human rights angle away from this, not to mention the dreadful optics of handling, civilians, men, women, and children this way. I mean, logistically, how would the federal government that's already backed up, how would wouldn't they have to build a gulag archipelago of detention camps all over the country, transit camps? They'd have to get cooperation from foreign governments to accept these people. It just seems like a complete logistical nightmare. And not to mention, there are attorneys like you who represent these people who are going to go to the courts and use every possible means of trying to preserve their right to stay in the United States and get a hearing and hopefully a favorable outcome. I mean, it's basically impossible, right?
It's impossible to do everything to the extent that Stephen Miller would like things to be done, just because of logistics. So it's a chicken before the egg argument. You can't round up millions and millions of people if you don't have, number one, the officers to round them up. 2, cooperation from state governments in order to do so. 3, disclosure of information from state governments in order to do so. And 4, the detention facilities in which to house them. And some people may remember from the Trump administration previously that they had to set up many detention centers for just only women and children. And as recall, many mixed status families were affected, as they will be again. And so you'll have parents being arrested by ICE, put into detention while their U.S. citizen children are in school.
Which, of course, creates all sorts of child protective services issues. So, I mean, what Homan is saying is that they're going to start basically where the Biden administration is now, right? Where they're going to go after people who are suspected of having committed a crime. They're going to go back to the workplace raids, which, of course, obviously will make people scared to go to their jobs. But I would imagine there's also going to be political pushback from their employers, who now are going to have lost their valued employees. They have to be replaced. This is all they're going to have to pay more maybe for Americans U.S. citizens to do these jobs. I mean, I'm just, I guess to paraphrase something that Joe Biden once said infamously, how much will fundamentally change after January 20th? I mean, I imagine it will be more aggressive, but it won't be the military, right? It's going to be ICE. They're already overstressed. They won't get a lot of cooperation. I mean, how much uglier are things going to get?
Well, what I worry about, given the limited resources and limited cooperation from certain states, for example, like Washington State versus Florida, is that they won't go after the high priority targets who are threats to the public, or that are flight risks in terms of like not returning to court or terrorists. What I'm afraid of is, in order to make those numbers really stand out because they're so large, they'll go after the low-hanging fruit. And so that would be parents of undocumented children, or that would be people who have pending applications and where they've admitted that they're undocumented, whether that's through Biden's executive order or another program. I think what you will see that will affect a great majority of people who are here legally now is that Trump will revoke temporary protected status for many, if not all, of the 16 whose citizens now are legally present only by virtue of the temporary protected status granted to them.
Right. And there was another thing, Susan, that people were saying that they were worried about, people that work on the humanitarian side of all of this, was the special app that the Biden administration created, that Trump would immediately do away with that. What kind of havoc would that reap across, all the segments of people that are showing up at the southern border and downloading the app, doing the process through the app? Because with Biden's, basically a proclamation is that once you go through that app, you would get TPS. Would just doing away with TPS and doing away with the app, what happens to all those people?
So the app is called Border One, and in effect, it did the same thing under the Biden administration that the Trump administration did, which is meter the number of migrants who appear at the border legally to claim asylum. So doing away with the app is not actually going to make a difference, because Trump will most certainly revert back to metering the number of people who can actually physically go to the border and present for asylum in any case. And then he will also reenact programs like Mexico program, so that even if you do appear for an asylum legally and you claim asylum legally, they will still make you wait in Mexico. Now, I don't know how that program will work out, because Trump's relationship with Labrador, I forgot the Mexican
Lopez Obrador.
Yeah.
Well, he's out now. There's the new president, is the lady Claudia Sheinbaum. She just was inaugurated. So there is no precedent for the relationship between Trump and Sheinbaum. So I'm curious to see how that would work as well, because Lopez Obrador had been there for so many years, right? So there was an open dialogue. Claudia Sheinbaum, I'm not so sure if she will be receptive to the remain in Mexico policy.
Right. Most certainly it will depend on the relationship that Trump evolves with the new president of Mexico, because that will have a big difference. That will have a big impact on building the wall, about who pays for the wall, about remaining in Mexico, about metering asylees, about Mexican authorities stopping people who are intending to apply for asylum at the United States. I don't think people in the United States really realize how much of a big part Mexico is in our immigration system.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, right now, under the Biden administration, one of the things that Kamala Harris did was negotiate with the Mexican government to help enforce America's immigration laws by, well, not enforce, but prevent asylees from traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border by interceding potential asylees in the southern part of Mexico. And then, of course, letting them stay in the vicinity of the U.S. southern border, and then allowing us to meter the number of potential asylees to present at the border. So I think that the relationship between the United States and many different countries will affect our overall immigration enforcement system. That's something the administration is not very good at. So I don't think they will have much in that regard as the Biden administration had.
And one thing I'd like to address is that our northern border, which I think we often don't discuss with Canada. I recently read a story about a human smuggling case, and obviously the northern border is just as treacherous, but in a different way, because you can literally freeze to death up there very quickly. And I read about an Indian family, a young family with a 3-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they froze to death trying to come across from the north down south to the US. And just this weekend, Justin Trudeau made a comment about saying, if you are an illegal migrant in the United States and you fear Trump coming back to office, he basically said, don't come north. We're not going to take you. We're not going to help you. So, I mean, are we going to see, though, other people, despite whatever Trudeau says, do you think we might see a lot of these asylees or any of these migrants head north, regardless of what Trudeau says, because there is a chance that they won't then be forced to go back to their country of origin?
Absolutely, 100%. And not so much because they'll be they'll be effectively deported from the United States, but because they don't want to be detained in an immigration detention center for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years while they wait for their first asylum court appearance, as the system currently is now. And despite what Trudeau says, they have infinitely more protections traveling to Canada than they're going to have traveling to the United States. In fact, they may travel through the United States to make it to Canada.
Susan, the U.S. Constitution grants everybody, including who's on U.S. soil, not just U.S. citizens, anyone, it grants you the right to see a judge quickly, right? How does the immigration system skirt that and detain people for years on end without getting them in front of an administrative judge? Is it because it's technically not a real court, it's an administrative hearing, or are they just breaking are they just ignoring the Constitution and just going rogue?
Well, there are going to be legal arguments made against the detention of asylum seekers for even greater than 1 year, let alone 8 years. But you are correct. It is different because we're in an administrative court system versus like a federal or state court system. In criminal cases, you often hear the term speedy trial. That does not apply to immigration cases. But that being said, how is it going to be if we hold asylum seekers for 8 years in a detention center? I mean, obviously,
permanent residency for people who came here and maybe their asylum status is stripped away or whatever.
There are, and this happens a lot because asylum seekers are in hardship that would inure to a U.S. citizen child if their parent is deported, for example.
So that's not considered extraordinary hardship under a U.S. law for a parent to be removed from, say, their 16-year-old child.
It's always hard to hear the facts delivered by you, Susan, but it's the facts, but it's just
That's
like
why we
we
have
have
you.
this.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a patchwork quilt of, there's federal law, then there's state law, and how they cooperate with one another, and it just
It's
seems
an
like it's going to
inhumane
be
system.
so messy.
I know you're it's hard to see the future. Nobody can. I mean, if you had to predict where we are in a year, though, are we going to be seeing a really broad-based effort, do you think, to deport millions of people? Or is it going to be just sort of a accelerated, greater than what we're seeing now, but something in between?
I think it will be far worse than what we saw the first time that Trump was president. I think that people will be shocked at what happens. Like, you'll see things like the separation of families at the border. You'll see children being placed in detention centers, pregnant women giving birth in detention centers. So I think it will be far worse this time than it was in the first Trump administration.
If I, as a U.S. born in the United States, U.S. citizen, fully vested, if I help an undocumented person, I hide them. If I Anne Frank them, Underground Railroad, am I breaking any laws?
That I can't say under federal law, but I do know under state law. So, for example, as Manila knows, I came from Florida, and I'm close personal friends with Ron DeSantis, or I should say that with a smile. And if you're caught even unknowingly transporting an undocumented alien into Florida, DeSantis passed a law in Florida saying that you would then be guilty of a felony. So I think you're going to see more and more governors of conservative states help to enact laws like that will have severe consequences on not only individuals transporting undocumented aliens, but also on U.S. citizens and U.S. companies who hire undocumented aliens. So, for example, in Florida, again, if you knowingly have an undocumented alien working for you, they can actually take away your business license permanently.
Wow.
Wow.
But here in New York, probably I would be okay.
So New York is like Washington State. We're known as sanctuary states. So what I'm interested in seeing is how will the Trump administration handle the non-cooperation from certain states to the federal government regarding immigration enforcement. So I'll be interested to see how they try to penalize states.
Probably by threatening federal funds for law enforcement,
Yeah.
or from the DOJ, that kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Susan, we'll make that the last thing, because I know you're busy.
Yeah,
it sounds like it's going to be even busier.
You're about to get busier.
Well, certainly the calls to our office have exponentially increased since Trump became elected.
Wow. Already.
Yeah.
Susan, thank you for your work. And
thank you.
Really appreciate what you're doing very much. Okay, and thanks for coming on. Hope you'll come back soon. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about. That's Susan Pai. She's a partner at Cap City Law in Washington State. Susan Pai has a degree in psychology from UCLA, where she worked at the internationally recognized UCLA Brain Mapping Lab. She attended law school at the University of Louisville and Nagoya University in Japan. And she's assisted the Senate Judiciary Committee on Fraud and Abuse Issues in Business, Immigration, Civil Matters. She's also submitted testimony to House Judiciary Committee Humanitarian Immigration Issues. She's done a few things.
Yeah, she's a busy lady, and I appreciate her carving out some time for us, because I mean, she does know the law. It sounds like Ted. I think.
I think she knows.
She might know some laws.
I would say she knows.
So
law,
this is what a just freaking catastrophe. That's all I'll say as we wrap like that. I know it's a major.
Well,
it was a major talking point.
I mean, a lot of people on the right, look, you voted for Donald Trump. I mean, you have some sympathy to his people. I mean, don't you? I mean, how do you?
No, it was more antipathy for the other side.
Well, okay, I understand that. Look, I can argue this. I mean, look, a country that doesn't guard its own borders, doesn't safeguard its borders, is not a sovereign state. I believe that to be true. We have there's a sense of lack of control, or there's certainly a lack of communication on the part of the federal government as to what is going on and why it's going on, and why the border policy has veered wildly from one extreme to another over and over the years. The American people don't know what's going on. And it's kind of like, who are these people? And there does seem to be an uptick in crime committed by some of these people. So I get why, and there's a sense like, I'm unemployed. Why should I be competing with someone who's undocumented for a job? I get all that.
Well,
really do.
you're not competing. You in particular are not competing with an undocumented alien unless there's a flood of cartoonists coming in from the South. That might be.
I will not name names, but there was a there was a cartoonist from the South who I was competing against. But I mean, that's neither here nor there because he didn't move here.
Interesting.
But like, no, I mean, I was like, whatever, who cares?
Well,
but I mean, it's not me personally, but I see why people would, I get why why people are against it. Some people are against it. But
I definitely agree that there's a problem at the border. There is. They're just plain and simple.
I think we have a communications problem is what we have. And it's not at the border. It's coming from Washington. And it's not just on border policy. The Biden administration and then, whatever this administration is now, I don't even know if we have an administration right now, but the federal government has not talked to us about anything. They have not explained their monetary policy. They have not explained why they're doing what they're doing in Ukraine. They don't talk to us about anything. They're doing the Harris.
They're doing the Harris. Look, in my mind, how this could potentially play out in a perfect world is we turn off the spigot of this constant flow of migrants, right? Like I don't know what to do with the ones that are already here because we don't even know what the number is. First and foremost, I would say where President Obama failed with the Dreamers, he screwed them over. Like he hasn't given them a full, complete pathway to stop dreaming and make it a reality. Those are like some 11 million people that qualified for the Dreamers Act. And he hasn't done he didn't do anything then. And the Democrats have failed consistently to do something about those people already. And that number has just grown year after year, especially in this Biden administration. The numbers did drop during the Trump years. So, okay. So now there's, I don't know, let's pick a number, Ted, a round number of how many people do you think have come in during the Biden years?
I would say roughly about 8 to 10 million.
10?
Yeah,
I was just going to say 10 as a round number.
Sure.
Yeah, just as a round number, 10 million, let's say. Okay. Let's assume we just cut off the fucking spigot. Okay, done. Imagine those 10 million, they're here. Fine, screw it. We will deal with it because of our declining birth rate and all that stuff. Okay, fine. They're here. Let's say we seal off the border magically. Just magically a border wall comes up magically. No one comes through.
Oh, we could.
Let's just entertain that idea. But okay, so that 10 million and then some, our economy can take care of, can manage that if we spread it out correctly. By this,
we have 330 million people.
We stopped sending money. We stopped sending money to Ukraine. The money that we send to Ukraine. Imagine if we set up housing for our own American homeless, and we set up, some kind of system to deal with the.
Well, the migrants are going to be the migrants are going to be a net positive in like 5 years, right? I mean, they're all getting jobs. They're going to pay taxes.
Let's just say they're here, but we got to stop it. At the same time, you got to stop it. You can't keep this like dripping. It's not a dripping faucet.
What right-wingers
at some point the dam breaks.
Anti-immigration people are saying, and they're not wrong, is that basically there's a cycle where the border's open, everyone comes in, and then like, for example, Reagan in 1986 with the amnesty. It's like, well, then we have an amnesty, and those people all get to stay because it would be gross and yucky to deport them all.
I think it would be.
And then that just keeps happening over and over again. And basically,
but you got to draw the line somewhere, right? But here's in my perfect scenario in my head is we draw that line. We deal with the people that are here. We deal with the dreamers. We deal with the people that are physically present in the U.S. But then we take the money instead of giving it to Ukraine or giving, this constant welfare to Israel who doesn't need it. That we actually take that money and go down to Latin America and all of these other countries that we have cooed and overthrown their leaders in the 20th century and help them fix their shit.
Yeah, and so that we're not getting Brazilian illegal immigrants, right?
We help
the socialist countries are doing fine.
Like if we stop fucking up those countries in Latin America and in the Caribbean, right? And we give, instead of giving hundreds of billions to Ukraine, imagine how much good we can do by putting it back in the US, by giving a little bit to Haiti, by giving a little bit to, Peru or wherever, right? Wherever that the US colonial footprint has gone to overthrow, you can stop that mass migration by fixing it at the root. But instead, we keep throwing our tax dollars away into places like Ukraine and giving it away freely to, our permanent forever problem child, Israel, right? They're constantly, they're like the Hunter Biden for us, right? Like they're grown adults, but they keep sucking at the teeth.
They make
and it's
Hunter,
like,
they
dude,
make Hunter look like great.
Like, dude, they effectively are America's Hunter Biden. And like, stop doing that. If we stop doing that, we can actually go fix the source of the problems. The people don't want to leave their motherland. They don't want to leave grandma.
No.
They don't want to leave their mom.
Immigration is hard.
They don't want that. So, the way we're dealing with them right now is not great either. And it's putting, we just saw in the some of the videos
also,
that I was
playing.
This
is no way to run a railroad, right? I mean, you let people
this
in.
is no way to run a country.
You give them legal status, and then you say, "Oh, we'll revoke your legal status after we've let you in." I mean, come on. I mean, that's an asshole way to run a federal government. It's like either have a consistent rule, have rules, have people follow them or not follow them, whatever. If they don't follow them, they're punished and thrown out. Look, I think
the answer is always money, Ted. It's money. Stop wasting our money towards war and let's put it into human infrastructure.
But you have to understand, I mean, it's true that the economy as it's currently modeled, and it's not a model that I agree with, requires an annual GDP increase of 2 to 3% a year. And for that to happen, you need you have to have more consumerism every single year. That doesn't happen, if you have like a population that's dropping like by 10% per year. So that's why they're importing people, but also wealthy elites, I was having a text conversation with our producer, they also want to bring in more workers, because on the labor management side, when there's a labor shortage, what happens? You remember when there was a labor shortage in the late period of the Obama administration, early part of Trump, people what happens? Wages start to go up, right? Bosses have to pay more. They have to give people more time off. They have to treat them better.
Well,
and the
elites
elites do not like that at all.
That's also there's also a bad part to it. I mean, if you're somebody that supports unions, like I'm a kid of a union member, right? When illegal immigration happens and they start taking those lower end jobs that would otherwise go to a union member, you depress wages and you drive down wages by way of cheap labor. And a lot of companies are gonna exploit that no matter what. Like that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So there's
when they say, oh, we can't find Americans to pick vegetables. No, you can't find Americans to pick vegetables for $7 an hour.
Correct.
If you paid them $35, you would.
If you paid them $20 an hour, right? Let's say in, I don't know, Colorado.
And everyone's fruits would cost more. Well, they cost more anyway, but also, so what?
Yeah,
I mean,
but then it's a profit margin issue, and those, the business, that's just how it is. But again, there's other labor type jobs that the wages get depressed because of the influx of, it's primarily young, as we would call them, military aged males that are able-bodied, working, able to work and earn money and send remittances back home to their country. So there's a double-pronged problem there with them depressing the wages, and they send remittances out to their motherland, wherever that goes. That money never comes back here.
But Manila, what you're not seeing is, you said you think that's a problem. You might think it's a problem. I might think it's a problem. But the people who run the system, they think it's ace. They love this system. This system is working for them. It's putting more money in their pockets. It's awesome for them. And
for them, they get to double dip in every pot.
Yeah.
The regular people like us, we get screwed no matter what way they choose to deal with immigration. But that's I'm saying from the labor side of this, I can see why labor unions are not fans of this influx of immigration.
No, their job is to try to do well for their members. So getting back to what Susan said, and I think we should get ready to close out, but I think just to recap, tell me if you got the same impression. The impression is it's not going to be 10 million people deported, but it could be 1 million. It could, and it's going to be ugly. It's going to be a lot. It's going to be more than we're seeing now. We're going to see some ugly scenes of family separation. We're going to see some ugly raids. We're going to see some optics that are going to be disturbing, even to some people who voted for Trump. I think so. It's going to be worse than it is now for migrants, and it's going to be maybe not as bad as it could be, because just logistically the system can't handle that huge number of people.
Keyword there, Ted, the optics. I think this could be just as bad under the Trump administration as it was under the Obama administration. Hey-oh! Nobody knew about that because they covered it up for Obama.
They won't be able to, but the media doesn't cover up for Trump the way that they covered up for Obama for kids.
That's my point. Is that it'll actually look as shitty for the migrants.
By the way, I'm really
now
glad
under Trump.
She confirmed my cynicism about those government programs. Like I was like, oh, so you turn yourself in at the border, you give them all your digits. I mean, conservatives have been saying we're giving them cell phones. You're not giving them cell phones. We're giving them tracking devices. I mean, it's like, that's not a favor. Okay, you should lose that cell phone as soon as you come into the United States. Chuck it into like the whatever
in
river
the Rio Grande. Goodbye.
Bye.
Use it for the app.
Yeah, get a flip phone. Yeah, you can download that app on something else.
Just drop it. But that's the whole point, Ted. Is the mainstream media gushed, gooed, and God over Obama, and he was literally the deporter in chief.
He was. He deported far more. He deported far more people than his predecessor, George W. Bush, who was a total asshole, but that's now forgotten because he hates Trump.
I think that we're just going to see a return to the Obama years.
Bush is rehabilitated,
but they're going to show it. That's the thing. All right, take us out, Ted. I'm going to find these buttons that I'm supposed to go to.
All right, I'll take us out. Here we go. Please don't forget to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube or Rumble. On Rumble, you have to do it either during the live feed, so you could either watch it on the live feed at 10 a.m. Right here and now for the next couple of minutes, or just go to the rerun file, which goes up in maybe an hour or two, and that runs like all day long. And you can become a paid subscriber. If you can do it, it's just $5 a month. If we get up to a few thousand people, then we're going to be able to keep doing this. So we are fully independent here. No one's behind the yellow curtain. We rely on you subscribers to help us not starve and become homeless, and more importantly to you, stop doing the show. So click on the button right now below the Rumble chat to help out. Really appreciate that. You can do a one-time donation or not. On YouTube, you can also, of course, follow us on Rumble, which we also appreciate. Please also follow us on the on YouTube. Lots of people are listening and not following. I mean, probably 1 out of 5 of you guys who listens actually follows. So please follow.
Please follow. It's free.
Follow. Yeah, it's free. It will literally, nothing will happen to you. You won't be tracked and deported. Nothing will happen. So
we're not going to spam you.
Nothing will happen. Nothing bad will happen.
No D pics. None of that.
Thanks, everyone. No, definitely no D pics. Anthony Weiner, I did invite him to come on the show.
Oh!
He said no. He wished us all luck, though. He said that he's a fan. Thank you very much to Putinbot Gaming for his support and moderating the chat. Please go check out his gaming channel. And again, subscribe, and help support independent news and content creators, but us first, and then the other ones. All right, everybody. Thanks, Manila. And
Happy Monday.
And we'll see you guys tomorrow.
Hasta mañana, everybody. Hopefully Putin doesn't bomb us by then. So we'll see.
Not adieu. Au revoir.
Au revoir.